Discover the Rado Captain Cook high-tech ceramic Rado England Cricket limited edition watch, a Swiss watchmaking technology masterpiece limited to 150 pieces that celebrates the collaboration of Swiss watch brand Rado and England Cricket. Don't miss your chance to own this exceptional and unique timepiece. Visit rado.com now to secure yours or explore Rado's authorised retailers. Hello and welcome to the Wisden Cricket Weekly podcast, a slightly different show for you today. First up, you'll hear from friend of the podcast, Mel Farrell, interviewing Eoin Morgan ahead of the T20 World Cup. We've got a few T20 World Cup predictions with Mark Butcher, and then Ben Gardner and myself, Rana, will guide you through some more T20 World Cup, County Championship and IPL chat. First up, Mel's chat with Eoin Morgan. Mel visited King's Avenue School in South London, where the kids have been receiving the Chance to Shine primary schools programme since late April. The programme typically lasts 6 weeks and helps children to develop key cricket and life skills. Eoin delivered a session for some Year 5 and 6 kids before sitting down with Mel to talk about Chance to Shine's work and the upcoming T20 World Cup.
Well, hearing the sounds of kids outside where we are in a classroom, and we're here at King's Avenue School. I'm here with Eoin Morgan, and there are kids outside because you've been out there teaching them all about cricket. Tell us about that.
Yeah, here I sit on the board of trustees for Chance to Shine, who are a charity who spread the love of cricket and teach young kids in undeserved areas, you would say, up and down the country, to about the beautiful game that I love. I've always had a close affiliation with the charity simply because of the background that I came from. I grew up in Ireland, as well documented, where cricket isn't necessarily that popular, and in the community that I grew up in, and in a school like King's Avenue that we're at today, cricket is not taught. But since Chance to Shine have come in, they've done an excellent job, integrated a new coach, and over the course of the next 5 or 6 weeks, kids will be introduced to it. So I've had a great day, as have all of the kids here and now. But Chance to Shine doing an incredible job, introducing a million kids a year into the game of cricket in areas, like I've mentioned, that fall outside of the structure of English cricket. And that plays such a huge part. I think with the evolution of the game, since the introduction of T20 cricket has outgrown its infrastructure, and I think a great example of that is actually the women's game at the moment, particularly at home, where the 100 has just catapulted its popularity, and yet again the sport is continuing to be challenged about how it creates opportunity for young boys and girls up and down the country. But Chance to Shine play a huge part in that, and I think each and every player does as well. Each and every player has a different background. Considering the team that I captained, the diversity within the team, and the fact that not all of the kids went to private school and primary school and were introduced to cricket at that level. It was always a volunteer or a local member of a club or a family member, but with programs and charities that Chance to Shine lay out, it really does present an opportunity, one that I didn't have at primary school, for young kids. And it's great, the power of cricket to teach such valuable lessons that will be there for your whole lifetime, regardless of how long or short you play the sport, are values that will be integrated into our life.
It's actually funny because I was thinking back to some of the first times that we met, and they were often at a Chance to Shine gig like this, seeing you out there. You're an absolute natural with those kids. You obviously love it. But this was pre even 2017 Champions Trophy, pre 2019 World Cup. Have you noticed things change since then when you come out and interact with kids?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the beautiful thing, isn't it? I mean, the cricket is getting bigger and bigger, and the litmus test is always young kids. If young kids are saying that they saw a player or a clip, either on social media or on the news, whether their mum and dad are talking about it. It's not necessarily that, to be honest. With the younger kids, it's always a friend that is telling them. But if that is the case, it means that we are doing enough for our sport to continue to grow it a little bit, but we can always do more.
Now there is a National Cricket Week. I know that's coming up from the 17th to the 21st of June. So that's going to be a big one. But you're not going to be here because you're going to be somewhere in the Caribbean, aren't you?
Yeah, I am. And it's sort of a win-win, really. I mean, the Cricket Week is just an opportunity for, again, us to create a bit of awareness around the game for the younger generation, which is great because, again, I would have killed for that as a young kid coming through. But at the same time, come the end of this month, I will be leaving for Barbados, and I'm really excited about it. I have great memories of the Caribbean, of which the first one was the 2007 World Cup when I played with Ireland, but the second one was winning the World Cup in 2010, the T20 World Cup, that is, under Paul Collingwood. I'm unbelievably excited about going and watching a game in New York because I've just come back from the IPL where everybody is talking about, the biggest game in cricket happening in New York, and it's going to be great to see India playing against the men in green, Ireland. I'm going to be there at that game as a fan, not as a commentator. And there are a few of my friends attending as well. I think it's going to be a great spectacle and a huge opportunity. When you think of the MLC last year being a success and sort of raising awareness about the opportunity that cricket could pose in the States, you get a lot of people in England saying, well, do you think it will work? And the answer is, it's already worked. I'm sorry, we're already late to the party. And when you have players having to choose between their home tournament and a tournament abroad, I mean, a player will always pick his home tournament if the opportunity is right, if the contract is right. There's not one person that I've ever played cricket with that would turn down a big opportunity at home over something else. So you have to give credit where credit is due. They've launched a good tournament in the lead into this year's World Cup. Over the last 4 months, we've saw on social media the erection of the Nassau County International Cricket Stadium, which is just amazing. You really do get the impression, following American sport in general, that if they commit to something, they are all in. And I get the feeling about this World Cup is no different. So, yeah, it'll be brilliant.
I'll come back to something that you were talking about there about players being challenged by things like the MLC and implications for English cricket. But you are going to be over there, and so's England. Where is England right now? They're defending champions, had to be honest, a stinker of a World Cup in India last year. Where do you see that team right now, that white ball team?
Yeah, like you say, defending champions. So they're ranked number 3 in the world. They have a brilliant squad. That didn't necessarily mean that it guarantees success. We saw that recently in the ODI World Cup in India, and things seem to go from bad to worse. And I'd imagine within that group, particularly the leadership group, the captain, coach, backroom staff, the leaders within the group, they would have learned a huge amount about themselves having gone through that, because it was like they were down and out and almost had no formula, which is very strange because English ODI cricket since 2015 has been built on one formula and has always been an identity to that formula that has led to success, providing that you stick to it. But England seem to go away from it and seem to circle around and make mistake after mistake. But I think the thing that's different this time in the preparation is certainly the messaging around where they're trying to go and what they're trying to do. And an indication of that was the 5-match series against the West Indies in December. Albeit not winning, they went there with a view of the World Cup, and they've reiterated with selection, which builds trust within a side, that they are sticking with a similar-ish squad. So cemented guys like Phil Salt, Will Jacks are included in that World Cup on the back of performances both previously but also in an England shirt. If you rewind the clock to the ODI World Cup, there was a huge song and dance about Jason Roy's inclusion, then his uninclusion, and just the messaging around that I thought was horrific. I really thought it was terrible. And that goes from everybody. You know, Rob Key has done a brilliant job with the test team since he has come in. If you were to give him a rating over the white ball style of messaging and management, and immediately after World Cup, he put his hand up and said, "Yeah, we've got a lot of things wrong, but we will learn." So the messaging from him, Luke Wright, the national selector, I thought drip fed into the changing room quite a lot throughout that tournament. And it's an important thing to get right, because when you have the quality of players that England have, and you see all the top teams around the world having this issue if it ever creeps in, if you ever find that the message isn't crystal clear and the planning isn't crystal clear, there will be a glitch somewhere along the way, and it will only open when sides are under pressure, which is not when you want it to open. So I think they're in a better state of affairs going into this World Cup. They have a very strong squad. You rewind the clock to when they won in Australia in 2022. The bowling line isn't that dissimilar. There's no Chris Wokes this time, but you add Reece Topley, Jofra Archer, Tom Hartley, who has come off a confident start to his international career. I would say it bodes well, but again, you at every opportunity you want to reiterate that message of where you're going and what you want to do, because if it starts to creep back in, you start to open up cracks that were established in India at the 50 over World Cup.
And there's obviously no Ben Stokes either, and he played a crucial role when they won last time. But who do you think might thrive in the Caribbean, and particularly in the conditions that are over there? Because there's been a lot of T20 cricket that people have been watching lately that might be quite different to what we see in the Caribbean.
Yeah, here I think it will be a little bit different. So I think it brings in two elements, particularly when you talk about batting in particular. It brings in an element of pure batsmanship when things get really tough and the ball turns or is slower or too paced. You really find the top echelon of batters, their skill level just becomes more and more valuable. I think the second part of that is the out and out power strikers. So talking about some of the biggest hitters in the world, the likes of Andre Russell, Joss Butler, the guys who are a little bit further ahead when it comes to hitting a long ball, those particular style of players on a slower wicket still hit sixes, whereas your normal average six hitter, is caught on the boundary. So I think when it comes to batting, those two types of batters become more valuable in each and every team. When it comes to bowling, I think how you adapt to conditions out there is key. We could go back to 2010 World Cup when we won it under Paul Collingwood, and it was our bowlers that won us that World Cup. We never had to chase anything more than 165, I think it was. And at the time, if you were chasing more, it was quite a big total. But at the time, our bowlers adapted really well. They used a lot of slower ball bounces into the wicket. Yorkers weren't necessarily the balls to bowl. But I think each and every side will have to assess conditions as quickly as possible, because they're going to be very, very different, from Dallas to Miami to New York, then down to Port of Spain and Trinidad or somewhere, Barbados. Conditions are going to be challenging, and the side that adapts the best and finds a formula early in the tournament, I think will be the most effective.
When you look at that England squad, do you see an obvious best 11, or do you see a squad that is going to be tweaked as it goes along, very much based on not just conditions but also matchups?
Yeah, here I think they have plenty of options. When you have a side that you're selecting that in the best 11 potentially has Liam Livingstone, I think Will Jacks will bat at 3, so he'll add something with the ball as well. But when you have Liam Livingstone possibly coming in at 6, and then that 7 role, possibly Moeen Ali or Sam Curran, depending on the balance that they want to go with. But they have plenty of options, absolutely plenty of options. I think in their stronger side, they can afford to play 4 out-and-out seamers, and that will not take away from the batting department at all. So, you know, when you think about it, a lot of that, the best 4 will come down to how Jofra Archer is travelling. I think a big part in that is building confidence in this series against Pakistan for Jofra in particular, because I think England could be a different side if they have a free-flowing, confident Jofra Archer. I know a lot of people will be thinking of rewinding the clock back to 2019 and the best of Jofra Archer and seeing him in full flow, but it is going to be difficult to get back to that stage in such a short space of time. And I think Rob Key has already highlighted that they're going to think long-term and not short-term with Jofra. So if it isn't quite going to plan, I don't think England will throw their eggs all in Jofra Archer's basket. But I do see, you know, a similar instance in 2019 where Jofra just came into the squad and played against Pakistan and just looked a cut above. So if he comes in and does that in this 4-match series, I think that elevates England even more, because an England team with Jofra Archer in it is a very strong England team.
Absolutely. And just changing tack slightly to another team, obviously there's always a question about India when you're coming into World Cups, and particularly this, and that, haven't won it since the IPL started. Something has happened in the IPL this year, at least, with these scores. We know there's been a lot of talk about the impact rule, and you were a big fan of the importance of all-rounders in the England side. So that's been brought into question as to whether that's impacting that. So I just wonder, first of all, do you like that impact sub rule?
Yeah, I do. Players are being forced to think outside of themselves yet again, and this is just part and parcel of the game continuing to develop, because we're seeing, I was out there for the first half of the IPL, so I witnessed some astonishing games of cricket, high scoring, high octane, and bowlers didn't seem to have an answer. Wickets were good, but the quality of batting was just on a completely different level. And from afar, you can sort of give throwaway comments about, it's boring, or it's this, it's that. It is absolutely brilliant, in my opinion, because it was Sunrisers Hyderabad that started it, and they had mapped out how they were going to play and what they were going to do. And it almost came by default. The introduction of Travis Head into their side after 2 games, I think it was, like so Rahul Tripathi missed out, and Travis Head went to the top of the order. But his opportunity to score at every ball is just mind-blowing. And the consistency in which he does it, nobody else has done that in previous years. And that is regardless whether there's an impact player, regardless of whether a side bats to 10. Normally you have opening batters that will get away, then they'll come back, and they'll get away, and then they'll get 100, and everybody celebrates the 100. Within that side, you are forced to think outside of yourself. His partner, Abhishek Sharma, did the exact same thing. And I believe that they were the catalyst for it, because every side that came up against them couldn't afford to sit back, because they were only going to play one way. And they batted deep. Aidan Markram, Heinrich Klaassen, you'd Abdul Samad coming in. It was just an absolute onslaught that kept coming at you. And when it failed the odd time, people would say, oh, well, this is the challenge that they were coming up against. Not for 1 minute did Pat Cummins waver from his messaging and what they were trying to do. The same with Dan Vittori, same with Travis Head. And they embodied that message because it was a really strong one. And when you're trying to integrate something as strong and as powerful under serious pressure of the Indian Premier League, it's very, very difficult to do. But when people get it right, it looks very, very simple. So in my opinion, it is the level of skill and consistency that batters are bringing every ball is superseding what a bowler can bring at the moment. And it'll come back. It will definitely come back. It always recalibrates and balances itself out. And it'll take somebody, another different knuckle ball, or somebody bowling around the wicket, across the stumps, or slow ball bouncer to try and counter what a bowler is doing. But I absolutely Loved it.
It's going to be interesting to see a little subplot for India's fortunes in this World Cup, because if it works, that could have a long-term impact on T20 cricket. If it doesn't, if they have a bad tournament, I don't know, it might be something that people point to and say that's had an effect.
Yeah, I think people point the fingers at any type of change. And I think to start with the impact player rule, I can vaguely remember the likes of Prithvi Shaw in the first 5 games that the Delhi Capitals played, or however many games it was. He just didn't field. That wasn't his role. Whatever they batted and whatever happened at the toss, he wasn't going to field, because the impact player would just come in once he got out or he was introduced into the second innings. And people were, pointing fingers to say, well, Prithvi Shaw won't field before India play the next game. And I was like, that's absolutely fine. There's nothing wrong with that. He still practices his fielding like anybody else. If given the opportunity, he wants to be out there. But again, it's change. People always retreat when there's change instead of trying to see the upside of having an extra dynamic element to our already fast, free-flowing game. So in my opinion, it has added value. It has not taken anything away from a T20 game of cricket.
Chance to Shine is aiming to support 1 million children every year through their schools and street cricket programs. They are looking to expand their work in secondary schools and make sure that children who receive Chance to Shine at their primary school can continue to play at secondary school and in their local community at a cricket club or street club. National Cricket Week is taking place from Monday the 17th of June to Friday the 21st of June. It's an opportunity to celebrate the sport, inspire children to take part in cricket, and show them why the sport can be a game for everyone. You can get involved by signing up for the Chance to Shine portal, which at teachers.chancetoshine.org, which hosts their bank of teaching resources for primary and secondary schools. All resources are completely free and give you a step-by-step guide for each activity alongside some useful tips. You do not need to be a cricket expert to get involved. Anyway, here's Mark Butcher with some T20 World Cup predictions. Butch, the T20 World Cup is just a couple of days away. Who do you fancy to win the whole thing?
Well, that's a hell of a start. Thanks for easing me in gently. I'm going to be wildly patriotic and say England. And there is a caveat with that, as there would be with any team. But I think as long as Archer stays fit, I don't think that there are any holes in that squad at all. Obviously, depending upon performance, I just think they look a really, really strong all-round squad stroke best 11, with Archer being the icing on the cake for that. I really, really fancy us. And there's the obvious sort of sting for Buttler and Mott around what happened in the 50 over World Cup and the willingness and the want to put that right. Plus, sort of young, exciting players who haven't really had much of a turn on the international stage yet, like Salt and Jacks, as well as all that incredible experience with Adil Rashid and Chris Jordan. Buttler himself has had a pretty decent IPL, and is still one of the world's best. So I just think that they look a fabulous team. And that's on paper, I guess. So nothing gets won on paper, but I like them a lot.
And I guess a massive problem with the 50 over World Cup defence was you had a group of players who don't play a lot of 50 over cricket anymore, and there wasn't that much role definition. So they almost went into that World Cup blind. Whereas now you look at that England likely 11 for the T20 World Cup, you know exactly what everyone's doing. Yes.
And there was literally none. In the 50 over World Cup, we discussed it long and hard about, sort of using Sam Curran as a sort of a middle overs bowler, and, just not getting, even given that there was a slight lack in terms of the impact players that they wanted to have, Topley going missing early in the tournament with an injury. But the players that they did have didn't actually do the things that they were best at the times when you needed them, or weren't asked to do the things that they were best at. And so it all fell apart quite quickly. But I think in this, the roles are very much defined. everybody knows what everybody's strengths are, and it would be very difficult, in fact, for the management to kind of mess that up.
Yeah, but comparing it to last time, there's obviously no Ben Stokes, so they don't quite have the same all-round depth. But a massive difference between franchise cricket and global tournaments is that you can't pick and choose who plays your squad. You just dealt with the hand you're given. And England have, compared to everyone else, generally speaking, there's maybe the odd exception, they have more all-round options. So they can be more flexible than other teams probably can be.
Definitely, and those all-round options have a very, very strong specialist hand as well. So it's not necessarily, you're not building a team of bits. It's not bits and pieces players by any means. There are sort of genuine strengths to go along with sort of all-round capabilities. So look, it looks like a fantastic squad. Fingers crossed, everybody stays fit and firing, and I think they're going to be a very exciting team.
Just thinking pessimistically, which I sometimes do before England play in global events. That top five, full of power, but they're all right-handers. Johnny Bairstow's not got a lot of runs recently. Phil Salt had a very, very good IPL playing specifically with Narine, which meant that no one ever started with left-arm spin against him. And you think teams are going to start with left-arm spin a lot against his England team.
Yes.
Will Jacks hasn't played a lot at 3, and Harry Brook's not played that much white ball cricket for a long time, actually. So lots of talent, but not necessarily bankable talent right now.
And I guess, sort of somebody like Moeen, with all of the roles that he has fulfilled throughout his long and illustrious career, is going to be the name that they will push forward as somebody that can counter those particular issues. And that batting lineup will be, everyone wants to bat at the top. Not everyone's going to be able to, and it will be interchangeable anyhow. So look, I'm not wildly concerned about that. It's certainly a tactical area that other teams will look to try and exploit. But the team they'll be very well aware of that, and that's something that the teams will do all the time. I mean, India have been without left-handers in the top 6, 7 for a very long time. Maybe that's why they haven't won one for so long. But
what do you think about India? They've got JSwal in the squad. He's a left-hander who's not been involved in previous tournaments. They could start with Pant, and it looks like they've got slightly more depth than they had 2 years ago.
Yes, yeah. I mean, they should be able to sort of send out hitting batters below number 6 if they get to the crease. That is, I mean, the way that Kohli played, the increased strike rate, his increased risk taking and execution against spin, all things that he would deny were he wasn't stung into action by the criticism from the media, but all of those things were a heck of a lot better. I mean, he had an incredible tournament, and so they are going to be very, very strong. It's been a very long time between rodeos for them, given that the IPL is still the premium tournament in the world. There's a few players will be making their final bow, and they of course have the magic of somebody like Bumrah with the ball. So of course they're going to be very, very strong. And looking to prove a few people wrong, and I think most definitely you're right that they'll certainly put up a better showing than they did the previous time.
Elsewhere, Australia, South Africa, and West Indies all look pretty strong on paper. You can see any of those teams challenging?
Well, I mean, let's start with the hosts. I think the West Indies will surprise a lot of people. I think they're going to be very, very dangerous indeed, and a player to look out for. Romario Shepherd is somebody that can make a real name for himself in the lower parts of a batting innings and bowling sort of really good sort of in-swinging death type stuff as well. And they're just very powerful. They're a very powerful side. They will obviously the conditions and hopefully the home support will be right behind them. And they've just destroyed South Africa 3-0 and have beat England before Christmas. They're a very, very useful and dangerous unit, and it would be so good for the world game if they were up there again, and take them lightly at your peril, I think.
It's one hell of a batting lineup, especially because the two guys up top, King and Charles, they don't get quite as many overseas gigs as the guys below them in the order. But I saw Ben Jones from QuickViz tweet the other day that Charles's batting impact is up there with the very best players in the world over the last couple of years. And if you're not really sure what that means, I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what it means myself. If you look at the other players at the top of that list, they're all the very, very best T20 batters in the world: Klaasen, Sky, Butler, etc. Just on Klaasen, Butch, that South Africa top 6 is ridiculous, but they are also still South Africa. So
yes, and they are incredibly talented. De Kock's been a little bit off form, but I tend to think of I think that he sort of wakes up in the morning and decides whether he's that bothered or not, and sometimes he is and sometimes he isn't. And I think in the World Cup for sure he will be. Obviously, you mentioned Klaasen's name already, and I also think they've got a real wild card in the team in Marco Jansen, who even in the same innings can be utterly terrible with the ball with his left arm swing, or utterly brilliant. Swinging it, bowling slower balls, using his height, etc. And there are, they've got people like Tristan Stubbs and Klaasen, etc. But he's as good a ball striker as any of them. He'll come in behind them, perhaps in a lost cause, and be able to hit the ball out of the park as well. So they're incredibly dangerous. I think that they've made a mistake in not taking Ngidi along. Otniel Bartman, who had a terrific SA20 bowling at the death, might well get a start in front of some more well-known names, and I guess it just depends with them as to whether or not they can hold things together within the camp, whether or not they actually believe that they can go on and win a major tournament, given how long it's been and how often that they've gone in as joint favourites or one of the top 4 sides, and ended up disappointing. But they've got so much talent; it's not funny.
And just on Australia, it's a team full of names where a lot of players have won a lot of big competitions across formats in recent years, and they've not played a lot of T20 cricket in the Caribbean recently. But you see the way that Star can come in, sort of lit up the business end of the IPL. You sort of back those guys to adapt to whatever conditions they come across.
They will be fantastic, and you would not bet against them being in the final come the shake-up. That's just what they do, right? And they have all of that winning experience. Cummins has proven himself to be an excellent leader, and Travis Head as a sort of an outstanding white ball player. They are going to be very, very good. I mean, perhaps the best question is the sort of top 4. Who do you see being up there at the end? Now, the hope for me is that the West Indies will be one of them. But I'm pretty much certain that England, Australia, and India will be in the top 4 come semi-final time. With West Indies being the romantic wild card for me, and I hope against hope that it's them.
Well, it wouldn't be a World Cup preview without mentioning New Zealand until the end, and then saying they might do quite well. But again, they don't look quite as strong as the top 4 or 5 sides on paper. But there's a lot of tournament experience there.
Yes, there is. Well, there is, because it looks pretty much like the same team that's played in every tournament 50 or 20 over since the beginning of the millennium, the next millennium. So of course, I mean, what it does tell you is it's going to be a very strong tournament. I mean, the groups with India and Pakistan being in the same group, England and Australia in the same group. None of that's going to be a cakewalk. You've got some really sort of interesting matchups with some of the sort of the new teams to the tournament as well. I just hope, as I said on the last podcast, very, very much looking forward to it. The sort of the T20 fatigue is out of the window for this one, because it's in a great part of the world, and there are some. Well, all of the very best players in the world are there, as well as some are hoping to make a name for themselves. So it can only be good. And
also comparing it to the 50 over World Cup. In 50 over cricket, the best sides really pull away. There's longer in a game to show you what the best side. Yeah. And also that competition's format, which was essentially just a league table, meant that there wasn't that much to play for quite early on. Whereas this tournament is properly up for grabs throughout basically. There's going to be very few dead rubbers. You might get that in the group stage, but there's a very compact Super 8 stage, which will essentially be where the top 4 is decided. So I think we're in for a really unpredictable tournament.
Absolutely, and it means it does leave space for sort of individual upsets in those games. There's jeopardy on pretty much everything, and that's the way you want it.
Awesome. Well, cheers for your time, Butch. As we said earlier, the T20 World Cup kicks off this weekend. We'll be back next week. Are you dreaming of some winter sunshine whilst experiencing some fantastic cricket? Howzat Travel are on sale now with their variety of options to experience England's cricket tour to the West Indies for their upcoming ODI and T20I series there this winter. Yes, England are going to the Caribbean again. Their well-known red and blue tour options can include international flights, personally selected hotels, match tickets, a cricket evening with special guests, and much more. Secure your spot today by either visiting their website at howzattravel.co.uk or find the link in our show notes below. Ben, the T20 World Cup starts on Friday with a replay of the first ever international fixture, USA versus Canada. We have 4 groups of 5. The top 2 from each group then goes into the Super 8, and we have a semi-final, 2 semi-finals and a final. Which groups do you think will be the most interesting initially?
To be honest, can I say all of them? Like when I go through them,
You can say all of them.
I think there might be something in each of them. So, I think it's worth going through quickly. So that first group, Group A, you've got India, Pakistan, Canada, Ireland, USA. Pakistan are not clicking right now, as we saw in that T20I against England, but going back further, USA just beat Bangladesh 2-1 in the T20I series, and even that result slightly flatters Bangladesh because USA rested lots of players for the final game, and Ireland beat Pakistan in a game in a series just before the England one. So, and also with just how those games are sort of laid out, USA play Canada first. They'd be expected to win that. They beat them 4-0 earlier this year, and then they play Pakistan. So you're going to have a US team that have already into the tournament in good form against, in front of a Dallas crowd, could be, quite a big home support. And then if Pakistan do come through that and they and Ireland win the games they're expected to, then you've got the last game of that group being Pakistan v Ireland. That will probably be everything on the line to go through. So that's interesting. The next group is England, Australia, Namibia, Scotland, Oman. And I think that's just although there's only 2 full members, in some ways the highest quality group, or the 4th best team in that group is maybe the best of all the groups. So Namibia are good. They are just the 2nd best team in Africa right now. Better than Zimbabwe, beat them most time when they play. And Scotland are also really good, dominated that Europe qualifier, beating Ireland in that. So obviously you'd still expect England and Australia to go through, but that is still, I think there'll be some good games in there, you'd hope. Next one is the group where you've got 3 strong full members, so New Zealand, West Indies, Afghanistan. And again, it's just how those games are laid out. The last game in that group is West Indies v Afghanistan. If West Indies do lose to New Zealand and Afghanistan also do, then that could be on a pitch that could take some spin a bit later in the tournament at St. Lucia. Could have, Rashid Khan against the brilliant West Indies batters. That could be really exciting. And then into the final group, you've got South Africa, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, Netherlands. And actually, with how good, obviously we saw how good Netherlands were at the ODI World Cup, we'll see a lot of those same players. And Bangladesh, again, having lost that USA series, they've got a really good record since the last World Cup, but basically all 3 games they've won at home. They're just T20 and white ball cricket is just so different in Bangladesh that it basically doesn't prepare them for playing in conditions outside of it. So I would not be surprised if Netherlands spring a surprise there, and obviously they put in a brilliant performance at the last T20 World Cup. Will be wanting to do the same, and will think that Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, there are opportunities there. So I think there will be intrigue in all these groups, and because with a 5-team group where 2 go through, one upset can really make such a big difference in those. So I think there is.
So that's such an important point, because we're really used to in World Cups, particularly 50 over World Cups, the format just goes on and on and on. And there are games you almost want to think they're more important than they actually are. So when Afghanistan beat England and when Afghanistan nearly beat Australia in the famous Glenn Maxwell game, we were saying, it could mean that Afghanistan go through if this result happens and then this result happens. So great results, great upsets, but they didn't have much of a bearing on the tournament. Whereas in this format, if England lose to Scotland, for example, Scotland would be favourites to go through from that group ahead of England, because the groups are so short and sharp. On the US, Ben, it is a massive deal that the US have beaten Bangladesh in a series. This is not just a one-off game, in a series. And as you say, in the final game that Bangladesh won, USA rested players. It's obviously one of the big stories of the tournament, US cricket. How good are they right now, and what's their potential? Because their playing pool compared to countries that are more successful than them on the international stage is much bigger, actually. So their potential in the short term is really, really high.
Yeah, and their playing pool in terms of their elite player pool is reasonably big, not least because they are not at all shy of just going and picking some player who is out of favour at another country. I know we've heard a lot about Liam Plunkett, who's not involved this time around. I guess that speaks a bit to their strength as well. But they do have Corey Anderson, who's a former world record holder for the fastest ODI ton for New Zealand, and still commands big bash contracts and has been batting pretty well for them. Harmeet Singh is a player with kind of an interesting backstory, sort of was kind of a bit muddled up in the IPL match fixing scandal, but kind of got through it. But has played some India age group stuff. They've got a couple of other guys in that bracket too, and they do seem pretty good. As I say, that it can be hard to work out exactly how good some of these associate teams are, not least because they just get so little chance to play against full member sides. But that beating another team in Canada who have also qualified, and you'd also like they're one of the better associate teams, beating them as comfortably as they did, I think does speak to them being a decent side. It's going to be but also that's all part of the fun of World Cups, and part of the fun of this is that I guess it's the testing stage for how good the likes of Aaron Jones are, who's and he's one of those players who is actually proper US born and bred. So it's a nice mix, and I guess you'd hope in the future this is the start for them to develop a real homegrown team going forward, so it can be sustainable.
We had an email in from Martin who said, "Will you please talk about the World Cup groups on the upcoming podcast? I was absolutely baffled once I discovered that there's no sort of seeding and groups aren't drawn. They are just selected by the ICC, presumably for the biggest commercial benefit. This has clearly been obvious for a while with India and Pakistan, but I thought they were at least selecting seedings. They aren't even seeds based on any sort of ranking. This isn't necessarily an issue, but it's even more baffling that there is zero mainstream news coverage of the fact that these groups are just selected to best suit the BCCI/ICC. The whole thing feels borderline corrupt, as it means there is no sporting reasons for what groups people are in. Furthermore, the pre-drawing of the Super 8s means that there isn't any incentive to finish top of the group, which is just weird. Sorry if this email has been a massive ramble, but would love for you guys to at least cover the gist of what I'm saying, as all my friends I've told about this were equally shocked about how the groups were chosen. Keep up the great work, particularly love the new women's podcast." Ben, Martin raises several very fair points. I like my football, and one of the things I like about football major tournaments is you get to plot out your team's potential draw, and it's a genuine draw. Sometimes you get an easy draw, sometimes you get a hard draw. Here, it is totally fixed. Even if you finish if England finish second in their group or first in the group, it doesn't matter. They are going to a particular group in the Super 8, regardless of whether or not they finish first and second. India, for example, know exactly which semi-final they're going to be playing in, at which ground. They're the only team that knows that. That doesn't feel, from a sporting integrity point of view, that fair.
Yeah, and especially India have picked a particularly strange squad compared to the other teams. They've got 4 spinners, and Rohit Sharma was being quite coy when asked about why they picked those. And you might think that, it's because we know if we get to semi-final, it's going to be in Guyana. So we can sort of pack our squad for that. I guess maybe if I were an ICC spokesperson, what I would say is that this World Cup, for one, is unique in that you're not playing it all in one country, and you're not even playing it in, it's not even like it's West Indies and USA, 2 countries. Obviously, West Indies is several countries. So from a touring fan point of view, it would help if you're an England fan to be able to know, okay, if we get through, I can go and book my hotels in this place and this place and have a bit more security rather than having to, know where you're going on the 17th of June and have to be there for the 19th of June or what have you. And yeah, that would be, I guess, the same. That they're also then talking from a commercial point of view for saying we want to guarantee that India are going to be in that later semi-final. But if you want to run a good World Cup, and I think that this goes across so many sports, is that sporting integrity tends to just generate good, exciting sport that therefore boosts the value of your brand, if you want to put it that way, and it makes it more likely that more people are going to get involved, I think. And that is just something that tends to get, you see, and I say you see this across sports. You see in the Champions League in football, they're rearranging how they do the group stage to ensure more games between big teams. But that's like, if you try and mess too much with it to try and get the desired result, then people are going to switch off a bit. And I think, especially in that first round, like, as much as we talked about an upset being so crucial, it does also mean that if results go to plan, then the games between the best two teams just don't matter. It doesn't matter what happens when England play Australia, because if England play Scotland, as much as it's exciting if Scotland win that, they're going to have a great chance to go through. If England win it, then that's pretty much it. They know their route to the semi-finals at that point. Nothing beyond that in that first round.
It basically means that there won't be a group of death in that Super 8 phase.
Yes, it also means that, yeah.
Which could be, theoretically, the most exciting bit of the competition. It still should be really exciting because it's quite hard to differentiate between some of the top teams. But yeah, I feel quite uncomfortable about India knowing their semi-final venue. I do understand it, that official reasons are that it's for broadcast reasons. It's essentially to guarantee that if India get to the semi-finals, they're playing at a time that is friendly to India TV audiences. But this is a luxury not afforded to other teams. No other team knows absolutely where they are playing their semi-finals. So when they come to selecting a squad, they have to hedge their bets a bit more. India know they are playing on, if they get to the last four, they know that they'll be playing their semi-final on the most spinner-friendly surface at the competition. They have picked a pretty weird squad. No other squad, I think, has chosen 4 frontline spinners. But they have done so because they know where they're playing the semi-final. That is a competitive advantage. And I think in cricket, we're just quite used to these things happening. We're just quite used to sporting integrity not being the number one sacred thing that competitions are built around. So yeah, I'm quite uncomfortable with it. I understand, well, they have done it, but this is a World Cup. Come on. Like, I don't like how preordained the route to the final is. I think there should be more jeopardy, there should be less predictability around who's playing who. We shouldn't be able to say at the start of the tournament exactly who's going to play who throughout the competition.
Yeah, but I mean, bang on, and yeah, and again, like, because what's tricky is I can feel a bit hypocritical, because I don't mind, say, always putting India and Pakistan in the same group, because we don't get to see that outside of world tournaments, and it's so good, and it's such a money spinner. It's such a good thing for the game in terms of having people watch that. But I think there's just a balance to be struck. Like, I think that's okay, but having a predestined tournament all the way, in which India are the only team who know every venue they're going to play at, if they do get through, that is an issue. And India and Pakistan being in the same group is not as much of an issue, I think.
But also, I feel like India and Pakistan don't need to be in the same group in a tournament like this, because it is very likely that they would come across each other anyway, either in the Super 8s or the semi-finals. So I understand why they've done it, but actually what you end up doing is potentially having India play Pakistan at a less consequential time of the tournament. Obviously, this absolutely guarantees they play each other, whereas any other way of doing it, there's that slight risk that Pakistan don't actually get through to the Super 8s. But it's a very good point from Martin. I don't love it, but I feel like in cricket we are just normalised to things like this. Ben, England's preparation for the tournament has been interesting in that they have a 4-match series against Pakistan. We've had 3 of them, but they've only got on the park in one of them. It does mean that some of their players are going to be very short on recent competitive T20 cricket going into the tournament. England did win that one game, and it was great to see Jofra Archer back, bowling quickly and taking wickets and hitting sixes.
Yeah, I mean, he never takes long to sort of get back into that amazing rhythm he's got. When he obviously returned last year for that South Korea, I think he had one sort of slightly iffy game and then takes 6 for the second. In this, he had one sort of iffy over where Fakhar Zaman gets into him, and then first ball of his second over hits 90 miles an hour. Azam Khan's chipping to cover, and then the last 3 overs of that spell, I think he takes 2 for 13, and that's including bowling the 19th over of the game. So yeah, he's just click straight back in. And it's not a surprise, but it is just worth, appreciating it for when it does happen, because, fingers crossed he's through those injury troubles, and he might be. There are examples of bowlers who have gone through long stretches of injuries and then have just come out the side of it and been, robust. But, let's just appreciate him while we've got him and not put too much expectation on him, because anytime you get to see him bowl is a blessing, I think.
Josh Buttler looked very good. It's an interesting England top five. They're all right-handers, very destructive players, but Johnny Bairstow not in great nick at the moment. He had one very good performance in the IPL. Will Jacks, similar, one very good performance in the IPL, batting in a new position at 3. Harry Brook just hasn't played T20 cricket recently at all. So he's going into the World Cup slightly cold. And Phil Salt, amazing IPL, but also he was doing so alongside a left-hander at the top that sort of stops the opposition starting with spin that goes away from him. Given England's right-handed, heavy top order, that is likely to be something that other teams try to do against England. So lots of exciting players there, but they're not as in form as they could be.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I guess given that, it will be interesting to see if they do try anything funky at any point. Obviously, in terms of that top 5, the one option they have is Ben Duckett. He could come in, and I wonder if Bairstow does start and has a couple of lean knocks, they might look that way, especially because if England were to beat Scotland, even if they lose to Australia, then they do have a little bit of obviously they can't lose it in the next 2 games, but they would expect to beat Oman or Namibia, whether it's Ben Duckett or Johnny Bairstow in that 11. They also could promote Moeen Ali at some point, as he's not unfamiliar with that in T20 cricket. One option, so Sam Curran was left out for the one game they did play, and he was interviewed on the side of the pitch, and he basically made clear that it was not him being rested. It was just that they went a different way. And, Chris Jordan bowled pretty well in that game, so you can see that. And then Moeen Ali opened the bowling. So actually, if England think they have quite a lot of opening options, and then Chris Jordan and Archer as death options, then you do struggle to see where Sam Curran comes into that side. But he would be another option to promote, to break up that string of right-handers. And obviously, if he's not in the team, you can't do that. So yeah, a couple of interesting considerations for England, and you say one more game before they have what is kind of their most important group stage game against Scotland, which is on the 3rd day of the tournament.
We're at the halfway point in the county championship, and things are tight at the top of the table. Surrey had a disastrous week, losing by an innings and 278 runs to Hampshire, picking up just 1 bonus point. Essex beat Kent to reduce Surrey's lead at the top to just 2 points. There was a double 100 for Jordan Cox, who's having an outstanding first season at Chelmsford. He's averaging 73 so far in Division 1 this summer. Matt Critchley also took 7 wickets in the match. He averages something like 27 with his leg spin since joining Essex a couple of years ago. Elsewhere, Durham beat Somerset in a very low-scoring game. 265 was enough for Durham to win by an innings. Ben Stokes continued his comeback with the ball, taking 8 wickets for not many in that game. David Bedingham is another one to pull out from that match. The South African batter scored another 100 for Durham. He has 500s in 6 games this season and averages 57 for Durham since joining them a few years ago. He's played 50 games and averages 57. I guess the one question mark against him was, could he do it in Division 1? Well, he's a leading run scorer in the country at the halfway point of the season. There were 4 draws in Division 2, with Yorkshire finishing 2 wickets shy of a win against Northants. But the epidemic of Div 2 draws continues. Halfway through the season, there have been just 7 results in the second tier, on average 1 per round of fixtures. Ben, is there anything you'd like to pick out from that round of games?
Yeah, a few things. I guess, the most striking thing was Surrey. And I guess we had the hint of this last week when, Worcestershire got into them early on. But I certainly didn't expect them to get onto a pitch where clearly scoring big runs was possible, and to get entirely run through like that. I mean, I was trying to rack my brains to kind of think of reasons for it. I guess one thing is that actually that batting going up, not all of them are in brilliant form. And if there is a pitch that has a bit of, like, if basically you can get through the openers and there's a bit of juice in the pitch, then you've got, Jamie Smith, who kept in this game, by the way. He's not, we've seen his attractive stroke play. Maybe there's you might think on pitches that are, more traditional county pitches that offer a bit to the bowlers, there might be a bit more of a question mark there. But still, that's such a turnaround from when they went from all but 2 points they could get from 3 consecutive games to not getting a batting bonus point last week to being absolutely mashed this week is kind of crazy. But obviously great for the competition.
Sorry, just on that game, I'd say 2 things. One, I think the way Hampshire went is a way to attack Surrey. Surrey have had a lot of success playing 4 or 5 seamers around, sometimes not having a specialist spinner in their lineup. Cam Steele was left out of the game recently despite taking lots of wickets earlier in the season. And Hampshire had Liam Dawson and Felix Organ. And although it was seam that primarily did the damage in the first innings, spin did the damage in the second. And that, I think, is just how I think teams should counteract Surrey when Surrey are playing away from home. And then secondly, one of those guys who's out of nick for Surrey is Ollie Pope. Ollie Pope, since scoring that 196 at Hyderabad, he averages 19 in first-class cricket, 4 of those test matches, 6 of those county championship appearances, over 10 matches. That's a really long stretch of form for a guy to be out of nick. And yeah, there are only 2 more county championship games before England played their first test of the summer. But I know he's England's number 3, he's their vice captain. But that is a run of form that test regulars rarely have in county cricket.
Yeah, and I don't. He'll play that first test, but it will be the kind of thing that people will really notice if he doesn't get a run in, say, those first 2 tests. Then people will be like, "Oh, hang on! Not only has he not got around these 2 tests, actually that 190 was so long ago, and they've been tested then." And also, then you look at the county championship thing, and then the narrative starts to build. So I think that innings in India is still just about fresh enough in the mind to override this, but it will quickly not be the case if he were to struggle in the test. And so if you'd got a couple hundreds in this, you'd say that he could have a lean series against West Indies and it wouldn't matter too much. But that's what this lean period will mean, I think.
We talked a lot about Jamie Smith 2 weeks ago. We talked a lot about Ollie Robinson last week. Jordan Cox, we've not talked about as much this season, but he's 23 years old. He's kept wicket before. He's not been keeping wicket this season. He is, if you speak to people on the county circuit, as talented a batter as Robinson and Smith. He's only 23 years old. I think he's the 2nd leading run scorer in the country at the moment. Ben, you spoke to him at the start of the season. He's a confident young man.
Yeah, confident is probably the way to put it, I think. He's, and in some ways, that's sort of refreshing that, you speak to a guy who thinks that they're really good and isn't afraid to say it. At that point before the season when he'd not had a great time at Kent recently, he said basically that he thought he was ready for his Harry Brook type year when Harry Brook averaged, about 1 million and bashed his way into the test team. And, at the moment he's putting that into paper. And then asked as well about why he wasn't keeping so much. He's sort of saying I think it's kind of because I'm just such a good fielder, which he is. He's an absolutely brilliant fielder, one of the best in the world. But that's a good slant to put on it. I mean, I think I do hope that somehow he can just get his hands on the gloves at some point, because that is a route for him into the test team that is unlikely to open up as just a mid-order player. And as much as England can get funky, I think they'd be unlikely to give the gloves to someone who is just not doing it at all in county cricket. But yeah, he is very, very confident, and it's currently that's working for him. Having taken a pretty brave move to move away from his boyhood club to Essex. This is closer to where he went to school growing up, so he's got a coach near to Essex he's been able to reconnect with as well, and perhaps that's had a bit of an impact.
A huge part of Essex being just 2 points off at the top of the table is Cox and Dean Elgar's form. They lost Sir Alistair Cook and Dan Lawrence in the off season, but arguably their replacements have come in and done better. Dan Lawrence actually hasn't had the sort of summer in the county championship, in Division 1 in particular, that Jordan Cox is currently having. Jordan Cox, 731 runs at 73, 300s and 250s, striking at 66 from 11 innings. That's one hell of a season so far. And a couple of years ago, maybe 3 years ago on this podcast, anyone who put any sort of run of form together on the county circuit was talked about as a potential England player, whereas now it feels much, much more competitive. England have a settled top 6. There's a lot of talk about who could potentially be the keeper. But elsewhere, there aren't really spots up for grabs. And you've got guys like Jordan Cox just banging down on the door from outside the team. Jordan Cox, 23 years old, averages 40, over his career, 73 this season. A few years ago, he'd just be in the team, whereas now you're like, well, he's got to wait his turn. It's same with Jamie Smith. These two guys, as talented as they are, it's not that obvious how they get a run unless one of them gets the gloves this summer, which is all very exciting. Do you think we should talk about the Ollie Robinson stuff?
Yeah, I guess we should talk about Ollie Robinson because, he never fails to to spark a conversation. And, having had that brilliant spell last week when you're like, right, he's back. He should be right back in the heart of England's plans, having bowled Sussex to victory in such dramatic fashion. And then the clip this week is him, bowling in his off spin. I think he was wearing the shades, wasn't he? Which,
at the start of the over, then took them off by the end of it.
Okay, when he was into his rhythm. But then people are, he's a polarizing figure. People are often quite quick to latch on to this and being like, what's wrong with this guy's fitness? Why is doing this? Why is he bowling seam? And there were just this doesn't matter basically. But the fact that he was bowling off spin at this stage.
Give us the context, because that clip that did the rounds didn't have context in it.
Yeah. So this was a game at Lords, which has been very batting friendly all season. So 19 wickets fell across this game in total, with nearly 1,200 runs scored between Sussex and Middlesex. And so basically this was right at the end of a dead game, basically the equivalent of throwing the ball to a wicketkeeper to go and roll his arm over, but instead they just threw it to Ollie Robinson and said, why not bowl some off spin? So this is just like a part-timer just getting through the overs so they can shake hands and go home. It's nothing to do with fitness, nothing to do with anything really. It's just like how this game panned out on a very flat pitch in a division where results are really, really hard to come by. You had, Jaden Steels, who was, a test quality bowler who will really, give England some problems this summer, also only took one wicket in the game as Robinson did. This just doesn't matter. And also his off spin wasn't going for very many runs. So that's one tick if he ever does try it full time.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think there are understandable criticism around Robinson when he bowled off spin in the middle of an Ashes Test match. I think this is very, very different. The context is completely different. What I would say, though, on top of all this, is that Division 2 cricket as a spectacle at the moment isn't great. You have a lot of games like this. The Yorkshire Northants game was really good. And I know that last week we had a really good round of games. But to have just 7 results in the first half of the season, Lords, for example, is a venue this year. 3 of the 4 games haven't even seen 20 wickets fall across 4 days. That is not great cricket to watch. I was there on day one. Pujara finished the day 91 not out, something like that, and batting looked easy. Wickets genuinely came through the batting errors rather than bowlers being able to properly get players out. And it's not just Lords; it's the same story at several other grounds Division 2. So I think that if you're looking at something to be annoyed about in Division 2, it's not Ollie Robinson bowling off spin at the end of a dead game. It's that there are so many dead games. And I think you're right to point out that Robinson wasn't the only test quality bowler who struggled in that game. Jaden Seals has been the bowler of Division 2 so far this year. He struggled to take wickets as well. So I think that is a bigger issue. Ben, the IPL final happened this week. An incredibly one-sided affair. KKR won it for the first time in a decade, bowling out Sunrisers for 113 after Mitchell Stark got KKR off to a flyer, bowling Abhishek Sharma with arguably the ball of the tournament in the first over, basically the perfect away swinger. Ben, Adya Sharma, Wisden India editor, wrote a really interesting article on Wisden.com this week about the final. He was there at the final, and he was talking about how the crowd, that wasn't a sellout, by the way, so the final was at Chennai, which is a big stadium, bigger than any English stadium, but not by that much. It's not on the Ahmedabad Eden Gardens scale. It's got a capacity of about 38,000, which is about 8,000 bigger than Lords and the Oval. Wasn't a sellout, and towards the end of the game, you had Chennai-based fans just chanting CSK. And Adya's piece was about how the IPL is in danger of becoming a bit complacent and being a bit over-reliant on the megastars of Dhoni, Kohli and Rohit. And, those guys are in their late 30s and early 40s and they're not really moving on. Yeah,
it's a really interesting point, especially because you wonder who are the next proper megastars that will come through. I mean, there are sort of candidates. I mean, Hardik Pandya is is sort of close-ish to that level as I guess is Jasprit Bumrah. But equally, what's interesting is kind of how that megastar focus is just at odds with the current era of T20 cricket, and the way it's only going to go more, where it is, more of a team game than kind of any of the other formats in some ways, because you do have such specific roles, and actually, a player will need to just throw away their wicket sometimes, and this thing of anchoring of getting hundreds, obviously, a lot of hundreds this season, but more because of the high run scoring rather than because of players taking it upon themselves, if you see what I mean. So it feels like T20 cricket is becoming less about the individual and more about the collective, and yet Indian cricket fandom is still about the individual more than it is about the collective. And so you also get these things where MS Dhoni comes out and has to keep getting pushed down the order because he basically can't bat for more than 15 balls innings because of how his fitness, and yet he's still the main draw for CSK. And then you also have the fact that I can't work out why they are planning to do another mega auction ahead of the next set of games, because that just feels to me like it does such a damage to team identity. Like, you can't be properly getting behind a team or be expected to be fully committing to a team to think about how they could repair ahead of next year when all the players or so many of the players are changing like every 3 years or so. And this felt like a time they didn't need to do it. Last time they brought in 2 new teams, so okay, they'd need a mega auction maybe to redistribute the talent, but this time you've got some really interesting teams in there that have their own identities, and this feels like when they could have started to build the brands more around those teams rather than you're an RCB fan because you're a Virat Kohli fan, and that's not going to happen because the teams are going to shuffle up again.
I thought it was a really good tournament. It was, as you say, I think teams having identities was something that really struck out. Sunrisers were notorious for just, especially when batting first, just whacking it and putting on those absolutely enormous totals. And yeah, I don't know what they do, but they have brilliant players coming through. Like Surya Kumar Yadav is probably the best T20 player in the world, yet he is unable to reach the level of fandom that those big three have. And I was talking to Abhishek Mukherjee, who also part of our Wisden India team, well-known writer in Indian cricket, and he was making the point that it is basically impossible to follow up the level of fandom that Dhoni and Kohli have in particular, because there were bigger factors at play outside of cricket that led to them being so popular. So Dhoni rode the wave of the growth of the IPL as being, he was an India superstar as the IPL was starting. He was young at the peak of his powers, and he sort of grew with the tournament. Similarly, Kohli, as much as he is arguably the best cross-format batter of his generation, he sort of grew with social media and cheap phone internet growing in India. So as more and more young Indians were on social media, Kohli was the face of that generation. And there almost needs to be a macro thing going on to produce the next one. And even though the talent is there, we just talked about Surya Kumar Yadav, Jaiswal is probably the most exciting young batter across formats in the world. Hardik Pandya is probably, aside from Stokes, the most exciting seam bowling all round in the game. These guys are unable to get to that level. And I guess a question will then be posed about the IPL. What do you do when Dhoni isn't around anymore? He's 42. This year, he averaged 5 deliveries per game, yet he is still the main draw. That's kind of mad.
And it's interesting because you might think that, well, maybe you just need those guys to move on before the next generation come through. But actually, Dhoni was, his career overlapped with Sachin. Kohli and Dhoni both won a World Cup with Sachin in the team. So like that wasn't a barrier last time. And do India want these main players to be the draw? Like, it felt like in the 90s and the 2000s, it didn't matter if India won or not if Sachin scored 100 to an extent. Obviously they wanted to win, and those victories that they had were cherished, and that World Cup that comes at the end of his career was such a huge moment. But equally, like, you almost, was there more put around the individual because there was less to put around the team? And now India are just like the best, or along with Australia, the best cross-format team in the world. Does that then mean that you can put less on the individual? Like, does it matter basically if there is another Virat Kohli in the future, or should they actually see it almost as like a positive in some ways if there's no direct replacement, because it means that there can be focus on on team success, and also that can make certain things easier from a selection point of view. I mean, Kohli's had a brilliant IPL. Rohit's not had a great IPL. No, Rohit's the captain, but you couldn't even really think of leaving either of them out because of who they are. But in the future, although Jaiswal is brilliant at the moment, if he does have a poor patch of form, if his profile is that bit less, it will also be slightly easier to leave him out of a side. So that will make India a better team if they need to make that decision, and they can. So I guess there's things up and down to it, but it feels like maybe there needs to be a switch in mindset because there is still there's a star focus even when the game itself is moving on.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend reading Adia's piece on the IPL as a spectacle. That you can find that on Wisden.com. And finally, you might have seen or read about the Wisden gear test earlier this year. Last week, I chatted to Chris from Serious Sport about the test that Serious Sport put on and everything that Serious Sport does. I'm joined by Chris from Serious Sport, who, among other things, organised our gear test at the Oval before the start of the summer. You might have read about it either online or in the magazine. Chris, talk us through the gear test. It was some day.
It was a great day, wasn't it? And it's always good for us to be able to get out of the office a little bit as well. So that was a great starting point for us to come down to the Oval, obviously a fantastic venue, and to meet you guys and the wider Wisden team and the testers. And ultimately, it's I think it's a really great opportunity, isn't it? Just to have a little peek about what's coming for the season ahead. Clearly, a lot of brands bringing a lot of new stuff every year. And for those players that are looking to replace kit, I just think it's a fantastic opportunity to get some experts and some club cricketers and some newbies into a room and let them loose for a little bit and see what's out there for them for the year. So we came down to the Oval with a whole van load of equipment, mainly bats, because that's the exciting bit for everyone pretty much, isn't it? So lots of bats to showcase for you guys to have a look at, a pick up, a feel, see what they're about, and then probably most importantly, jump in the nets and have a hit.
Yeah, I was just feeding the balls, so I didn't on the bowling machine, so I didn't get to use them. But I was fascinated that the guys who did use the bats had such different tastes. You know, like one person absolutely loves one bat, another person absolutely loves another one. So I've not actually bought a bat myself for 6 years now. If I went bat shopping, what would I find that's different now to the last time I went bat shopping?
And I think you've really hit the nail on the head. Really important point straight away is we're all looking for something slightly individual, bespoke to ourselves. We all play the game in our own way. We all have our own sort of strengths and weaknesses. We all have our builds and what's going to suit us. And actually, that individualized aspect is really key to choosing a bat. One of the things we're sort of always very keen on is if you're going to buy a new bat, first time in 6 years, get yourself down to a shop, get yourself in there, see what it's about, see what the choices are, pick them up, feel them, interact with them. Hopefully you get that expert knowledge and that expert sort of interaction with ourselves or whoever, and it's just an opportunity to bring that to life so that you can ask those questions about what's new, what is it that I'm looking at and feeling that's different to maybe what I've had in the past. Your game might have changed in that period. Obviously, we have a lot of youngsters coming through and they're developing their game, they're developing their strengths and their weaknesses, they're developing their physiology. And a bat that suited them a couple of years ago may not suit them anymore in terms of profile and shape. Ultimately, a cricket bat still looks like a cricket bat. That there isn't such a change that it would hopefully not look exactly sort of what you're hoping it's going to look like. But a modern sort of style of profile and the modern style and the modern demand in terms of that more dynamic play, lots of boundary hitting, lots of T20s being played, lots of short format cricket. And probably there is that sort of movement and demand for a slightly more modern shape to be able to access boundaries more often, to be able to make sure that there's lots of willow in that sweet spot area, but you're not picking up and feeling a really heavy bat. So bat manufacturers and the master bat makers are constantly tinkering and constantly looking at how they can offer a player that lovely balance of lots of willow in behind the ball, but not to the point where they feel like they can't get the hands through quickly and play. So I think if you came into the shop and you asked that question of myself or my colleagues, we'd be starting to obviously ask you a little bit about how you like to play the game, what it is you're looking for, what your strengths are, and what it is you want the bat to able to support you with. And then it's actually trying to maybe narrow that down within the range that we offer, the ones that we think might suit you. But ultimately, we just allow people to go into the shop, pick up as many bats as you've got the time and the inclination to do, because ultimately that's the best way of really gauging what's going to suit you, really.
I speak to people who are getting into cricket for maybe the first time, and there's a sense that not just bats, but the cost of kit more generally can be prohibitive. Is there a market out there for people getting into cricket for the first time for cheaper bats and cheaper equipment?
It's a really good point, and something we see year in, year out. Prices are going up across the board in every way, and particularly in the sports world, and particularly in cricket. Unfortunately, we do see that, but I do think it's really important across all age groups, but particularly for those cricketers coming into the game where the parents are looking to kit them out for the first time for hardball cricket, and that's a pretty major threshold where little boy or girl is coming along and playing cricket for a few years in their club development programs or their all stars or whatever it might be, and they're just turning up and playing, and then suddenly they're going into hardball cricket, and it's like, here's the list of things you now need. From head to toe, you're now looking at helmets, pads, gloves, box, moving into an English willow bat potentially, a bag to carry it, or it can be a little bit inhibitive in terms of price points. So one of the things we again pride ourselves here at Sirius, but I think in the cricket world is really important across all retailers in all areas, is trying to give a choice and trying to broaden that sort of spectrum out to give people choices at all levels, so that if they can go into a top end bit of kit, brilliant, there's the choice there. But actually, if it's just getting into the game, there are some great entry level quality products across all those areas, across all the product lines from a lot of brands. So there's still good choice. But hopefully a decent price point that allows people to access the game. I'm certainly not going to sort of sit here and say that it doesn't add up, because you're buying 4, 5, 6 bits of kit at the same time. There's clearly a bit of an impact there. But actually, we try and maintain a good level of choice at those levels to try and limit that and give people an access into the game. And then the hope is that obviously, as people are growing, they're not having to replace 6 bits of kit at once. It's one bit at a time here and there.
You're wearing a fleece that I recognise. So Sirius Sport, my club is a Sirius Sport club. Do you want to explain, Chris, what Sirius Sport does for clubs like mine?
Yeah. I mean, for those of us for those people who have seen us on, hopefully in the gear test, or have come across us in the more recent past, and those that are yet to find us, ultimately, Sirius Cricket is a cricket facility based in North Hampshire, just off the M3 near Basingstoke. Indoor cricket facility, so we have 3 cricket net lanes here, an indoor arena. So lots of opportunity to participate in the game all year round, particularly during the winter months, as you'd imagine. People are hitting balls and practicing all the way through, and the indoor arena is housing indoor cricket leagues. So we've got a lot of cricket going on 12 months of the year internally, alongside the shop and the retail element there that we again open all the way through the year, and our online sort of aspect that complements that. So hopefully lots of opportunities there to find us from the participation and the cricket retail aspect within Sirius Cricket. And Sirius Cricket is part of the Sirius Sport group, and you're quite right. With the Sirius Sport motif, we are hugely sort of hopefully now sort of offering lots of opportunities around the teamwear market, namely around the cricket world in particular that we started off with, and we're very strong in the cricket world. But that has developed through Sirius Sport into lots of other sports. So we now cover football, rugby, hockey, netball. You name a sport, we've probably got a teamwear and a team sort of using our kits. So the teamwear is really good. It's really strong. Hopefully you've highlighted there your club use it and are very happy with it. So that's fantastic. The teamwear model that we use is an online team store, so accessibility, usability is really key to us both from a club's perspective, but also from an individual's perspective. Just making that hopefully as streamlined, as simple as possible, allowing people to set up, manage their team store really, really quickly and really simply from the club, and actually that's their bit done. And then individual players can come in and use that service one-on-one. And they don't have to wait for any bulk orders, and they can individually sort of deal with us on that side of things. So allowing us to manufacture everything here, get everything into a nice timeline that they can get kit really quickly. So yeah, if people are sort of looking, from a club perspective, looking for potentially a new teamwear provider, or just to have a look at, see what we do, please have a look at Serious Sport. Please have a look at that sort of from the teamwear aspect. By all means, give us a shout and give us a call, drop us a line or an email, and we can give lots and lots more information. And then from the cricket perspective, obviously exactly the same on the teamwear. And then the equipment side, like I said, the physical shop, the online shop, all the way through the year. And if you're in the south of England or you've got a bit of a travel time and you want to hit some balls, a fantastic facility as well. So we hope to try and cover as many bases with Sirius as we can.
Awesome. If we had this conversation in 24 hours time, I would literally be wearing Sirius kit from head to toe.
I'm happy to do another 24 hours if we want to meet and do that. We do a little spin-off and do another one. But if
yeah, it's a shame that we're not talking on a Saturday morning, actually.
With the sun shining and playing some cricket, which is great.
Exactly. Anyway, thanks so much for your time, Chris. Listeners, we'll leave all the information, all the relevant information in the show notes below. That is everything for today's show. Cheers for listening. Cheers, Ben. We'll be back in 2 days' time for the Wisden Women's Cricket Weekly Podcast.